Here's some tips to help you out with working with the pen tool in Gravit and in Illustrator. So the first things first is that you have to zoom in order to do this well. You're not going to be able to see the edges of things if you're all the way out here. A pro tip is to use the space bar to kind of move your canvas around as you work so you don't have to always zoom in and out. It saves you some time. Another tip is that you have to get in the habit of clicking and dragging. And that's something just to learn with this tool. If you click and release your mouse or your trackpad, you'll find that you don't get the handles you need in order to navigate and edit a Bezier curve. Another thing to know is that you don't always want handles to be super long. They get really difficult to manage. So here's a rule to kind of keep in mind while you draw. Your handles should be no more than 1/3 of the overall curve you're creating. So if you drag the handles way too far out, you're going to see a really wonky line. So keep that in mind. And the last big tip I can give you is to be mindful of where you put your anchor points. And it can be kind of challenging to know where to put an anchor point. But think about it this way. Anchor points always go on corners and edges, and they usually show up where the line is changing in its directionality. So maybe the curve was going downward and now the curve's going back up. There's probably an anchor point there so that you can change the handle's direction, right? Let's put this into practice. So let's say I wanted to make something that looks like this. My first rule was to zoom in. So I'm going to hit Command+ on my keyboard to zoom in as close as I can. And then the next tip was to hold the space bar, right, to kind of move my canvas around. You'll see the little hand pop up. Then the next tip was to click and drag. So I'm going to activate my pen tool. I'm going to click and drag. And wherever I drag is the direction my line will go in. Now, I also considered how long this handle is going to be. So if we follow the 1/3 rule, I'm not going to make this handle this long. That would be far too long for my shape. So I'm going to think about 1/3 of my overall curve on the cloud and kind of pull it in that direction. Then I can kind of click and drag the next part of this cloud. Now if my handles don't match up perfectly, I can go back with my sub-select when I'm done. If we remember from last time, sometimes we have something like this happen, where the next line we don't actually want the handle. We want it to be kind of cornered, a curve, not a curve. So what I want to do is click on the last anchor point I did. I'll get this little V. When I do that, what that will do is clip the handle. You see how the handle disappears? And it'll allow me more control. Now let's say I don't really want to pull this next point too far. I can kind of cut my curve in half and put a point right directly in the halfway mark. That'll allow for some control as well. And I can repeat this every time there's a corner. You'll see me putting an anchor point. I'm going to clip this and repeat this until I create this entire cloud. Now once I'm done, there's a few things that I might want to tweak, but it kind of gets hard to know because it's covered in white. And we discussed that sometimes our fill color gets in our way. There's two ways we can do that. We can either delete the fill here on the right-hand side, or we can simply hide the fill. I like to hide the fill because I want the fill later. I just don't want it right now when it's in my way. To hide the fill, all you have to do is click the little eye next to where the fill is. We also know to use the sub-select tool to kind of clean up points and lines while we work. So we don't always have to get it perfect the first time around. We do have the option to fix our lines after. So if you notice your line is kind of like off and you don't like something, you can edit it. Now in this case, I think I need another anchor point. So I'm actually going to activate my pen tool, hover my mouse over the path, and you'll see that it goes from an X to a plus. This will allow me to add an anchor point. I can go back with my sub-select and really like finagle this to have more control for this shape. That's a tip. If you notice you didn't put enough anchor points down, you don't have to draw it over. You can simply add an anchor point after you're done drawing, which is kind of handy. And when I'm done cleaning this all up, I should be able to zoom out, move my shape, then show my fill. And I'm going to make this black. And now I have a cloud that contains really pointed curves, and I use all the techniques I just mentioned earlier.